Hello everybody and welcome back. 11.1 is here and 2023 is here. Happy New Year to everybody. Happy New Year to you, Jean. How you feeling?
Hey, Happy New Year, everyone. Oh my God, already.
You look tired.
Yeah, it's tough. One more year.
Yeah. It's incredible because it just felt like we went on holidays and holidays already ended and we're back. And there's a new patch coming and we're going to talk about it because there's going to be some cool things coming with 11.1. Also, the patch notes are launching at the same time. If you go to playgwent.com, they are there. And Jean, what was the focus for this one? Because this just comes after the update which introduced a lot of gods and deities to Gwent. And we are seeing some changes happening right now just after the Christmas break.
Yes. So as usual, balancing and monitoring of the new cards. Obviously, with the Christmas break, we have been limited in capacity. A lot of the stuff we've changed has had to be decided before we went into holiday, which made us more worried about what we were changing and how.
Yeah.
So a bit of a smaller patch, but still. And on top of this, we are bringing some extra focus to a few archetypes here and there. So namely the Druid Alchemy archetype.
Ooh.
So a few big changes to the full bounty archetype, right? Not the mid-range package that was used in some of the mid-range decks. And a few changes to SD movement.
Nice. I like the last change the most, to be honest. Because it's Cartel, I mean, I'm biased. So, neutrals as always, my friend.
Neutrals as always.
And we have an interesting big one to start off with. It's Unicorn and Chironex to kick us off into this update. So what's happening here? Because now, if you have one or the other, you're getting something better in terms of playing it and drawing a card, which is already awesome.
Yeah, so they got the similar line of text, right?
Yeah.
Where if you have the other one in your hand, on the deploy, when you play it, you also get to play the other one, and then you draw a card to replace it. So what it means is, for instance, you play Unicorn, you boost another unit by 3, and then you play the Chironex from your hand, you damage something by 6, and you draw a card to replace it just in the same play, right? So obviously a massive difference in points.
Yes, solid different in points.
And so reason we decided to go this direction for Unicorn and Chironex is that it kind of allows us to keep the original spirit of the card, where you kind of have to choose between which one you want to play first, and also take that risk of like, I need to play both in the same round, right? And at the same time, we think that this gives them a bit more uniqueness, this new effect, and obviously it makes them way more interesting in terms of points. So interesting, in fact, that we had to increase our provision by 1 each. And you might have noticed, but the arrows is in a different direction.
Yeah, on the assets that you're seeing, the arrows are in a different direction. They were done by Ryan, but fret's not, because that means that, the first number is the current one after the change, and then the other one is the previous one. So the old number that the card had in terms of provision and power.
Most likely we'll go to the old way after the next patch.
Exactly.
But, for this one, please enjoy things being that way.
This is a one-time deal, and it's, if you want to blame someone, blame Ryan, but please don't, because we love him.
Yeah, we love him.
True. Moving on, staying in the topic of neutrals, we have Sangreal and flavor text, I would say, flavor, not text, but flavor change, I would say, which is it purifies and boosts a unit by 12, then infuse it with once both players have passed, damage itself by 12. So it has the added effect of wine and its effect on people.
Yes, Sangreal is basically what happened to me and probably a lot of other people on New Year's Eve. You drink a lot of it, you feel amazing, and then not so much so.
Yes.
Let's be honest, this little rework is not necessarily meant to be super competitive. It's a niche effect to experiment with. It's particularly, some decks that like to play around with the idea of count of points not being exactly what it is at the end of the round.
Yeah.
I'm thinking stuff like playing around with Count Caldwell. And yeah, you can also do stuff like consume the unit that has been buffed by Sangreal, etc.
Yeah, but it's for sure a fun effect to play around with. So I think players will be experimenting with it and will appreciate the change. Moving on, we have some category changes for starting with adding alchemy to a lot of cards, but also then we have spell categories, organics, warfares, and a relic at the end. So what was the idea here? It was, I think these cards were lacking these categories, so that's
yeah. So
yeah.
What happened here is we have a lot of cards in neutral, in particular, though not only, right? The Vandergrave's Blade is on the list. That did not have a category, and we don't necessarily want all cards to have a category, but we felt like we could do a good pass, right? And we had this particular conditions that we wanted. So we wanted the category to obviously be flavorful, but we wanted it to achieve something, right? Only add the category if we feel like it can actually have a positive impact and get the card to see some play. So a lot of alchemy being added, which is going to be relevant since we did a few buffs to Druid. But also, as you said, summoning Sepulchral suddenly getting spell, Bone Talisman getting organic, which you might care about if you're playing Aracas Swarm. Epidemic, that is not only getting organic, but way more interestingly, this very sweet promotion to 4 provision, which makes it a tech card that you might actually include in your deck if the meta has some like 4Ps that grow very tall. And a few other stuff like Vandergrave's Blade actually getting the warfare category to be tutored more easily.
Yeah, I feel like these changes, especially the one for Epidemic being organic, but also like Bone Talisman, are ones that were mentioned by the community that it would be cool if these cards had these categories. So I feel like it's a nod their way, and yeah, it's pretty good. And yeah, like you mentioned, Epidemic also has a provision buff here. Perfect. That's it for neutrals, right?
Yep. Let's move on to Nilfgaard.
Nilfgaard. We'll be starting with Taurus Van Emrace, Highest Priest. So a couple things changing here.
Yeah, so Taurus Van Emrace is not able to bounce a card that was from your starting deck anymore. The card has to be has to be generated in one way or another. To compensate for it, the card now gets boosted by 2. And there is a fallback where if you had no target, you actually get to create and play a bronze unit. So to explain a bit our reasoning, with Nurse we did in 10.12, mid-range NG is finally stepping down. But as a result, Enslave 6, which also got buffed in 10.9, is suddenly showing all of its potential, and by including this, ISP's version of Taurus Van Emrace, they're able to replace Defense Skyline, which gives them so many tactic and, more importantly, assimilate triggers.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating. It's frustrating to play against, let's be real. The thing is, we think that more generally, the ability to just replay cards like this wasn't exactly what we wanted for Taurus Van Emrace, and in particular the fact that the card was played in such a specialized way where you only wanted to play the highest priest version, not the first one. So this change kind of allows us to put the card back to the archetype where we wanted to see play, which is more assimilate geared one, which is not going to have so much difficulties actually getting interesting targets on their board, which did not start in the starting deck. And which also, might consider playing the first version for all of these assimilate triggers.
Yeah, perfect. And that's it for Nilfgaard, if I'm not mistaken. So one last look before we move on to Skellige, and there's a couple changes happening here. We'll be starting with Feral Bond, if I'm not mistaken. So let's show that one up here. So yeah, once again, changes to things in terms of if it's not in your starting deck, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So Feral Bond is not going to be able to create to generate in general a warrior that was from your starting deck anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So the very clear intention of this is that we don't want you to make more copies of Highland Warlord. Stop. So basically, we think that like with the addition of tier, people kind of reacted a bit negatively to it, but we don't think that tier is the art of the deck. We think that the deck was actually popular before, like in 10.11, and kind of since they started playing Feral in it, and that the heart of the deck is basically Highland Warlord and being able to play it a lot of times and getting past that threshold where your raid cards are kind of gonna destroy everything.
Yeah.
So by removing that ability from Feral to create more copies of your Highland Warlord, we're kind of limiting this ability from the deck to destroy everything. At the same time, it kind of allows us to preserve the core of the deck. Like you can still play a Highland Warlord, and we think you can still play Feral, right? It's still a card that allows you to set up your Bloodthirst. It's still a card that offers this kind of Swiss knife functionality, especially if you meet the Bloodthirst condition. So yeah.
That's the change. And then we have also on this wave, we move on to Svalbard, which is actually not a balance change, but a bug fix. So we fixed a bug where a Svalbard Fanatic was spawned and then transformed in a bear animation in the same chain of effects. So Svalbard will pretty much react twice. So that is kind of not what we had intended for the card and how it works.
So that kind of sounds like a niche interactions.
Yeah.
But because players very often were setting like big combos with Idoran, for instance, wasn't. And so to give you an example, you have Idoran on the board and you spawn a Fanatic. So what happens is that Idoran spawns another Fanatic, but sets it to 1 power. Because it's 1 power, that triggers Berserk, so it transforms into an elimination. And that's supposed to be 1 trigger from Svalbard. But Svalbard was actually reacting twice to it and triggering twice.
Yeah.
And because it was happening in like these long chains, it took some time for us to kind of pinpoint it, because Svalbard was only supposed to react 5 times here, not 7.
Yeah.
And we wanted to highlight it because even though Svalbard hasn't seen like, it's having decent results, but not explosive.
Yeah.
And nonetheless, some people have voiced frustrations against the card. So we wanted to highlight that the card is going to be a bit less chaotic because it's going to have less of these triggers that were not supposed to happen in the first place.
Yeah, pretty much fixed what was broken in this case, and not changes done in terms of only balance. But of course, this will be impacting the gameplay and the balance of the game, so worth mentioning here. Moving on, we have a couple changes to Axel 3 Eyes, Crow Clan Druid, and then Draco Turtle at the end. With the Axel 3 Eyes and Crow Clan Druid, looking into the crows and kind of why you want to have more crows on your side from like Crow Mother, for example. But yeah, Jean, take it away.
You pretty much said everything, actually. What we're doing here is that we're tying these 2 cards, I mean, in general, the Crow Clan package better together, because it used to generate, as you said, these Crow tokens, which, I mean, you get Crow tokens, cool. You did care about it probably at the time where the cards were released, because you had a few synergies here and there with the number of beasts on your board, but never really worked out so much.
Yeah.
So in modern days, it was just a nice few points. So instead, we want you to care more about these tokens. So in one hand, Axel 3 Eyes is able to transform them into Crow Messengers, meaning you're actually going to get carryover out of it if you play your cards right. In the case of Crow Clan Druids, you're going to get more of these sweet alchemy triggers.
Yeah.
And the Draco Turtle change kind of comes on top of this, because historically it's a card that often so used in the Druid Alchemy deck, being a target for Mydroem.
Exactly.
So, it's a simple increase with armor and power.
Mydroem, aka the magic mushrooms. So yeah, more power, more armor. That's what the Draco Turtle likes. And that concludes Skellige for us, and we can move on to Northern Realms. And we have Melitele to start off with. So a change of provision here. and some changes to the card itself. Let's talk about why.
So, what we saw in reaction to Meta being released is actually a lot of disappointment, right?
Mm-hmm.
People being disappointed that her power level was too low.
Mm-hmm.
And we think this disappointment is actually a very good thing because it shows that players care about that card and like the design and wanted it to be good.
Yeah.
So we took a big look into it. First thing that we touched is there used to be a cycle reset mechanic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've just straight up removed it. But the reason it originally was here was to prevent the mother effects from triggering during your mulligan,
Mm-hmm.
which would allow you to, dry pass because suddenly a unit was on your board.
Yeah.
The problem is that the mechanic, like the reset itself, became frustrating because now you had to kind of measure all of your shuffles in multiple of 3. Otherwise it felt like the shuffles were not worth it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you were losing value. So instead, we kept the protection, but we've built it into Mother, where the unit is only going to get spawned on a row where you actually have a unit.
Mm-hmm.
You can, still trigger it, but if you have no units on your board, you don't get a unit.
Easy.
And on top of this, we've added a small, not so small, it stacks up, effects on Crone, where you also get to boost the card itself by 1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The idea here is that instead of having the Crone effect just like improve every other effect and not necessarily have an impact right away and not being feedback so well, having the card boost itself is a small way to see that you're actually gaining points.
Yeah, it just feels better to play it, right?
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, finally, the usual provision buff.
Classic. It needs to be there.
Classic.
Yeah. Moving on. That's it for Northern Realms. We are jumping into monsters, and we have Lilith's Omen. So a change of provision here.
So while not at all on the same level of disappointment as Militale, another card has been considered weak as Lilith Omen.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've seen is that, the results aren't amazing, but some players are actually experimenting with it, and we do think the card has some potential. We didn't want it to move too fast with it, which, resulted in us only wanting to do a 1 provision buff to it for now, and we'll, keep looking into it. Dagon falls into a similar situation where at least, before the Christmas break, when we were looking at it, a lot of people were experimenting with it, not really finding results. But we wanted to let it settle before we actually touch it.
Yeah.
So we're not doing anything to Dagon this patch.
Yeah, so in this case, if I understand correctly, you want to wait and kind of see what the changes that are coming with this update, and probably, Enslave and Raid, having less control in this case will help other decks to thrive a little bit better, and maybe we'll see Dagon in different iterations of monster decks.
Yeah, all of that, and also just let players develop the technology, right? Because some decks that take time to be figured out.
Exactly. Sometimes it's not the first idea that you have for it, but you need to be pushing on and thinking of new ideas how to utilize a card and make it fit into your deck. Yeah.
Because otherwise, if you buff it too early, that's how you get
that's how you get problems.
Viper, Witcher, Mentor.
Yeah.
Suddenly getting its adrenaline cap higher up when the deck is popping off.
Exactly. Well said. So we're done with monsters. I think we're ready to move on to Syndicate, and we will be starting with Count Reuven's Treasure, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely.
So a provision change here, and adding the crime category to the card.
Very similar situation to Lilith Omen. Cards being tried, not really showing greatness. So small nudge with a provision buff, but way more importantly, adding this crime tag, which we expect to be kind of impactful. Because in the first place, it was a bit weird that, the card would steal one of your crime slots. And yeah, in general, it's going to make the card more synergistic, and it's also going to make it more tutorable. Yeah.
Tutorable is what we like, because we like getting the cards that we want from our deck as easily as possible if we don't draw into them, of course.
And while we're on the topic of new cards, Saint Gregory is in a similar situation to Dagon, where we were seeing a lot of experimentation with Saint Gregory, though not necessarily achieving great stuff. And so we wanted to let stuff settle a bit before we touch him again.
Yeah. Sticking on syndicates, there's also blood money. So a change here now is order damage enemy unit by 6, then gain coins equal to any excess damage dealt. Whenever an enemy unit with bounty is destroyed, increase the damage by 1. If the order is used up, refresh it and set its damage to 1 instead. So interesting change here.
So yeah, this is the first change targeting the full bounty archetype. We wanted to tie blood money more closely together to the archetype and actually make you feel like you have a purpose. So what we did with blood money is lower the base damage by 2, so from 8 to 6. But now it actually you get to increase it, and more importantly, you get to refresh it.
Yes.
So one stuff you can do is use blood money in the first round, like slam something with 6, and then as you kill bounty units, get to build back up your blood money order so that you're able to use it again for a big value in the third round.
Exactly.
So in general, it allows us to make blood money be more flexible, give you some rewards for that gameplay you're running, and well, also just collect more bounties, right?
Yes, which you of course want to do. Okay, and that's that one, and then we move on to the hails. So we have Ignitus Hail to start off with. So a change of power and provision, but at the beginning of the game or when spawned, set own power to 1, while on hand deck or on the battlefield, whenever an enemy unit with bounty is destroyed, heal self by its base power. So interesting change right here.
Yeah, so Ignitus Ale already was a Horror Gold type of card, right? Where it kind of builds up slowly in your deck, and then it comes out in the third round as a point slam. And we had to buff it in the past because we overestimated the number of times you might be able to give bounty. This change we did to Ignitus Ale keeps this idea of it being an Horror Gold, but instead of just getting bigger by 1 whenever you give bounty, it now makes you care about collecting bounties instead, and not any bounties, because you care about the base power of the unit with bounty that was killed.
Yeah.
So in general, we think like the card works better that way with what the archetype is trying to achieve, and also it's bigger. It is bigger. Yeah. Which matters a lot for the type of point slam its role it's trying to fill.
Exactly. Cool changes. Sticking on the Hail family, we have Octavia Hail. So changed fee. Fee 2, boost an allied witch hunter by 2. If you destroy an enemy unit this turn, boost by 3 instead.
Yeah, so Octavia Hail already had like this fee 1-to-1 that allowed you to boost allied witch hunters. What we've done here is that it's now 2 for 2 unless you meet the condition, in which case it's 2 for 3, so pretty good spender.
Yeah.
And the idea here is that very often you might have trouble finding great ways to use your coins in that archetype. So the Octavia Ale is a specialized spender for the archetype.
Exactly. And then we have the Brute.
So a few other, ease of play. Yeah, smaller changes and like ease of use changes. In the case of the Brute, it used to work that it would like track the last enemy unit with bounty destroyed, which made it a bit clunky to play around because sometimes you just didn't want it to kill unit with bounty anymore.
Yeah.
With that change, he now tracks the highest power enemy units. Which makes him way more
much
interesting.
Better. Yeah,
much better. Yeah. Much easier to play.
And less awkward to play.
Yep. And then some very simple changes in the form of more powerful Fabian, Conviction Extractor going down to 4 provision with 1 less profit. And in the case of Scapegoat, it's pretty interesting because so you're getting 1 more profit, but also the card has 1 more power, which for this loyal unit, not exactly what you want.
Yeah.
But it also means that now when you collect the bounty out of it, you get 2 coins and not just 1.
Yeah.
So it's a bit more interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it comes with a price, but I think it's worth it in this case. So that wraps up Syndicate. Correct? Perfect. Squaretel, last one to talk about, and we'll have the changes I want to highlight here in a moment. There we go. So we're starting with Milva. Whenever an allied unit moves, boost self by 1. So like you mentioned in the beginning, some changes to movement happening.
So we're pretty happy with the results of the challenge to Guerrilla Tactics. So as a result, we give a bit of love. So in the case of Milva, we kept this original design of the card being like this immune engine, but it now reacts on unit being moved in a way that is similar to Volblood Sentry. But the big difference is that it's not targetable.
Yep.
And very often your Sentry were the first thing to go if you were playing Movement Squaretel.
Amen.
So yeah, we think you might be interested in playing that one.
Yeah.
Right-Head Dragoon basically got the Guerrilla Tactics treatment, where if you move an enemy, you damage by 1. If you move an ally, you boost it by 2. So not even, because we acknowledge the fact that there is always going to be an incentive to move enemy units. And then more power to Malina and Tranbor, just to make them a bit, give them a bit more survivability.
Yeah.
And obviously better in tempo.
Yeah, since they're all part of the package, it makes total sense to have that change. But yeah, especially like the change to V-Head Dragoon, because I think, like you once mentioned, it's you normally go for the damage instead of the boost, but now the boost is also a luring way to go and kind of see if that works out for you. So yeah. Those are all the changes that we wanted to highlight. Of course, you can find the patch notes at playgwent.com. And that is it for developer update 11.1, meaning there will be 11.2. And I forgot to mention here is it's weird to start with 11 in the beginning, because we were at 10.11, 10.12, and then it was like 10.13. And I was like, no, it's new year. We start with the bigger number in the front now. So 11.1. And 11.2 coming soon. But yeah, exciting changes coming in. If you're watching this on a Monday, patch is coming out on a Tuesday, most likely in the morning European hours. So enjoy it, have fun. If you have any questions or feedback, be sure to drop them our way. And I think that's it, if I'm not mistaken, John. I think we're done. Perfect. Thank you all for watching, and we will catch you all later. Bye-bye.
See ya, everyone. See you next month.